All right, official good afternoon, and welcome to the Build Better Summit's second session, Building an Equitable Economy. My name is Julian Parra. I'm Senior Vice President and Region Executive for Bank of America. I'm also the Board Chair of the San Diego Regional EDC. My pronouns are he, his, him, and if you want to dabble in Spanish, my native tongue, you can call me Julian Parra. As you heard earlier, EDC mobilizes business, governments, and civic leaders around an inclusive economic development strategy, all done in order to maximize regional prosperity. Now and in the years ahead, we're committed to ensuring the region's economic recovery includes all San Diegans. I'm very pleased to introduce today's session speakers for our business philanthropy and social efforts. Other organizations are collaborating to more inclusive and sustainable global economy while promoting a just society and a sustainable environment. This session is Ted Howard, President and founder of the Democracy Collaborative. Ted is going to be joined by John Vu, who is Vice President of Strategy and Sarah Walczyk, Executive Director of Sarah Foundation. Kaiser Permanente is a member of both the EDC and San Diego Neighbors. They're a leading healthcare system and anchor institution. And the Satterberg Foundation is a member with close to 30 years of experience in philanthropy and a strong commitment to equitable trust-based philanthropy. These speakers are going to share lessons learned about supporting local organizations, businesses, and influencers whose efforts transform our economy and society to become more inclusive, just, and ecologically sustainable. Let me hand it over to Ted, who's going to start off the conversation. Ted?
Thank you very much, Julian. And we had a little bit of technical difficulty in the middle of your conversation, but I think we got enough for your introduction. Thank you very much for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Howard. As Julian said, I'm the co-founder and president of the Democracy Collaborative. We like to think of ourselves as a laboratory for the democratic economy and bring about a more just and sustainable economy and communities all over the United States. I'm delighted to join John Vu and Sarah Walczyk in this conversation today, and mostly I intend to get out of the way and possibly ask some probing questions. I haven't met Sarah before, except about 5 minutes ago, but I'm familiar with your work, Sarah, in philanthropy. And full disclosure, John and I, it seems like we go back forever, but I think it's maybe 5 years. But John is at Kaiser Permanente, which everyone thinks of course, as a very important health system in the United States, one of the very largest. But I was astounded one day to realize that if Kaiser Permanente were not a nonprofit, but were a for-profit organization, it would probably be listed in the top 50 of the Fortune 500. So we have a really major philanthropic leader with us today, and with John, a major leader of the healthcare industry. So I think with that, I know our attendees, John and Sarah, are eager to learn examples of what you're doing and what they can take away from it. And I'd just like to invite everybody, before turning it over first to John and then to Sarah, to just, even if you're not in philanthropy or you're not in healthcare, to really, listen to this from, is there something you're hearing here, if you're a business person or you're in government or whatever, that makes you want to explore how to make certain kinds of changes in your own institution, because both Sarah and John have led powerful changes within their institutions, and there's much to be learned about it, particularly in terms of equity and sustainability and inclusion. So with that, let me turn it over to John Vu.
Well, thank you, Ted, for that very nice introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm John Vu from Kaiser Permanente. I'm vice president at our system level. We have somewhat of a national footprint and a very prominent set of operations in San Diego, in Southern California, and in California in particular, but we do cover the whole West Coast. And we have operations in Honolulu and Baltimore on the East Coast. So we kind of run the gamut of the country here. And I think maybe one thing I'll say is just to start maybe being a little bit more universal, because Ted touched on that, is that at some point, as a not-for-profit health system and a not-for-profit 501c3, there are some obligations that you sort of have to live up to. And then you have a mission, and a socially driven mission. And for us, it happens to be to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. And I think we've always taken that very seriously. When we were founded 75 years ago, we could have gone the other route and been for profit, but there was something in particular about our founders choosing that, and the idea of healthcare being not for profit in this mode. And we have a particular extra sort of special secret sauce to our model that we're fully integrated. We're a health plan all the way into care delivery. And I think some of the advantages that affords is that there's this heavy financing mechanism, and there's very rigorous business needs that we've got. But then we're also a care delivery. We have 40 hospitals, 700 medical office buildings in our footprint. And I think we take that presence very seriously, and what our responsibility is, what our need to engage in civic life and government, and what we do with that presence. So I can get into a lot of examples today, but I think one bottom line here is this idea of call it corporate social responsibility, call it corporate citizenship, call it an anchor mission. But I think we'd like to think about all these assets that we have. Yes, we have philanthropy and grants that we could do, but we hire and have a huge HR opportunity. We purchase and procure billions and billions of dollars worth of goods and services every year. We invest billions and billions of dollars in our portfolio and our treasury holdings. And so how do we think about that for broader impact investment? And then, we have facilities, and how do we think about the construction of them, the design of them, how to be more inclusive and opening and welcoming to the community. And then the environmental eco footprint that we have. So these are things that I think 6 or 7 years ago, we sort of really started to recognize that how do we intentionally and deliberately think about those assets for the greatest social, economic, and environmental impact in our society. And I think that's kind of the broader mission that we're on now. And then the recent, this year with COVID, economic downturn or collapse and catastrophe of that, and the calls for social justice have accelerated and pushed us even further, both for self-examination and thinking about what have we done, what can we do, and then thinking strategically, then how do we turn, again, all those assets yet to even another level and lens around equity and inclusion. So maybe that's a little bit of the kind of the overview from where we're coming from in terms of our sort of approach and mindset. And I'm happy to kind of get into various specific examples as we get into the conversation. But they do range from driving economic and small business entrepreneurship all the way to housing and affordable housing opportunities, homelessness issues, health and wellness in schools, driving policy, and using advocacy as some examples.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Well, I have a question too I'd like to ask you, but I want to go first to Sarah. And have you followed that, Sarah?
Thank you, Ted. I'll start by saying I'm Sarah Walczyk. I'm the executive director of the Satterberg Foundation. It's a family foundation based in Seattle, Washington. I've been the executive director for about 4 years, been working with the family about 7. One of the reasons that we're connected to California is because it's also one of the places where we make grants and have family residing. And so approximately almost 30 years, I should say, the foundation came together by the family. And I was the first non-family staff member to join 7 years ago. And I think that's a pivotal moment in time because the organization grew tremendously. Its assets grew overnight. And so I think the founding board at that time took a step back to look at, where were we most needed? And I think the core part of that is how we went to community to help us build the strategies moving forward. And so we designed a grant making strategy that we've been in over the last couple of years, which has really defined how the family wants to continue to grow and learn. And this idea of taking risks and kind of pushing boundaries on who philanthropy is, how we want to show up, the same kind of journey that John explained is, we have a pretty broad-based mission. It's to promote a just society and sustainable environment. And I think the journey that we've been on for the past 7 years is, what does that truly mean to us? And I think this mindset of moving our grants into positions of power, activating all forms of capital that John said. How are we hiring people from community to help make decisions? It's just been a way for us as a family foundation to figure out how we could show up in a space that was moving more from a charity mindset to more of investing in movements. And, this journey for us, and I think why, I'm able to share these kind of conversations is, this can be pretty transactional. You can make the grants, you can make your general operating multi-year grants, you can realign your investments. And for us, that's something, we can also talk about later, of just the impact and catalytic and systems investments we've done with a portfolio. But more importantly, this has been a building of relationships and trust and kind of our identity as an organization. And this is like the work that has taken the most time is, we are really now more in a, excuse me, in a position to confront so many of the systems that are even allowing us to have this type of wealth that we have. And that's not the conversation that we were having 5 years ago. These are conversations that we're walking into now, and building that lens with the family is how I see my role. But most importantly, this idea of reparations and returning these resources. These are conversations we were never having in the boardroom 5 years ago. And I think as a family foundation for us too, just figuring out what our role is in this movement. And I think it will continue to be informed by what the community says they need. And that's how we have been able to maintain that flexibility, nimbleness, getting resources to movements, responding to COVID, the racial uprising, like where are we most needed and how can we best support these organizations to get their voices heard?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. As I listen to both of you, and you said it explicitly, Sarah, but I think it was implicit in what John was talking about as well, is you both of your organizations went on a journey that moved from a kind of charity mindset to, as you said, an investment mindset, or one could say even more accountability for the place where you are. You're both, in a sense, John very explicitly is Kaiser Permanente is what we would call the democracy collaborative, an anchor institution in communities for a long time, but in many ways, so are you, Sarah, your organization, because it's committed to investing and funding in place. And I wonder if, I think there's probably a lot of people on this who are listening in who find what you've said attractive, but it's challenging to go on this journey. Does it cost more to make this approach? You've already got so much work to do. How do you step back and ask these questions that can often be uncomfortable and the like? And I just thought maybe if you would each, and maybe Sarah, start with you and then to John, just give a little more about that journey you went on and what it looks like and what you need to be willing to call into question and kind of put yourself in the mindset of a business person or a government person or a university person in the San Diego area, not so much what's your advice, but how to approach this kind of thing that you both have done so well. So I'll put you on the spot with that, Sarah.
I think it's a lot of those things you said that I don't think it has occurred to me until most recently, the amount of extra time and energy that we had put into building the culture of our organization and building the relationships between family, staff, community. That does take almost the same amount of effort as it is to us to do programmatic work. You can't just throw a couple DEI articles in a board packet and assume everyone's going to really be on the same page. And so I think we tried that approach. I think it was a more passive approach until we started that working of really changing hearts and minds, which is a challenging amount of extra lift. The board, the family, you're asking people to re-examine how they might be living in the world, looking at their own personal power. Like, this takes a lot of extra energy, which we put in time, because we needed, if we were going to be accountable and in relationship with community, that's the muscle that you have to develop. We still have, regardless if we want to push more power and decision making in a community of how to use these resources, at the end of the day, we're still working with a family who's in control of the assets. And if we want to be, transparent and accountable, then that means we have to have the conversations that you're talking about, and, not creating new strategies, but these movements and this work has been happening for hundreds of years. And so how do you jump in right now and say, okay, well, what is it do I have to learn? And, we brought in consultants. We've hired people from community who may or may not be experts in philanthropy, but might have lived experience to offer us, in all of us, in a place. How do we have a multiracial, multi-gender, multi identities coming together to make decisions together? It's like, how are we kind of building that, what we would want to see, in the world? But I think, we still have a lot to learn. It's not lost on me. Like the COVID, that for me was an opening. How do we go deeper? How do we respond to that? When M4BL said, philanthropy, we would like you to put 50 million into this space. Like, it's creating opportunity for deeper conversations that we would have had. And so I think it's ongoing. I'm bringing in next generation board members. This is, we have a rotation of staff. Like, how do we just name that these are things that we believe and build this into how we do the work through and through? So this isn't just another carve out strategy or a lens. And so I'm in it every day. And, it's not, and I think that's the point. You could have someone show up to a meeting and say, why are we doing this again? We're like, oh, well, we got to go back and re-examine this. It's like, it's just for me, I'm just constantly working on building it into the overall, just as what we would consider mission critical work, is just how we believe and how we see the world.
That's great, Sarah. I have some appreciation for what you're going through and day to day. And there's, and it's a continuing journey. You don't just get there and then you move on, John, what do you have to say? When I first got to know Kaiser Permanente, and I remember being in Oakland and actually talking to your supply chain people and saying, how do you make decisions on what you purchase? And it was so impressive. This may 5 years ago, something like 20% of your procurement, at least at that time, it's probably more now, has to meet certain green requirements, for instance. And now you're building in local requirements. And that's just a major, and if we'd had that conversation 30 years ago and I'd said, what's your green purchasing like? People would look at me like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of that. Or it's way too expensive. How do you, move an organization and embed these new values so that it becomes just not something you have to fight about constantly, but it's part of your DNA?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And Sarah said it beautifully in a couple of different angles. There is culture, and then there's sort of institutional behavior and practices and policies. And I think in an ideal world, those all align in some way. I think for us, we've had the benefit of a very strong social mission from the beginning. And, a lot of organizations have mission statements, and I think they're sort of just nice things that are sort of stuffed in a drawer somewhere. And in many places, they wear their heart on their sleeve. I think we're closer to that end of the mission really grounds us and drives us. And it's about health and improving health for individuals and in communities. And I think the way that it's a confluence of things like where's the world going? What are we seeing? What is the science telling us? And when you open the aperture, like when you think about health as more than just what we do in terms of pills, devices, surgeries, visits, those kinds of things, when you take this broader view of like what shapes and makes a person healthy or what contributes to their wellness, and then you think about your mission for health, then that sort of opens up all sorts of lanes for you. Now, it's easy then to have sort of strong leaders who believe in that and champions, but it's also, you run the risk of those becoming fads, flavor of the month, a new SVP, a new CEO or whatever. So that's been the real challenge, that when we found that sort of grassroots sentiment forming, like health is way more than the coverage and care that we provide. But how do we kind of rally people around what we can do about it? And if it is about access to education, if it is about job opportunities, if it's about food insecurity, if it's about stable housing and all of those things, how do we jump into those things? And knowing with some humility, lots of humility, that we will never, ever be able to solve all those things on our own, how then do we responsibly kind of jump into those things and do them in some smart way, but then not have them go away again, after some time passes or a leader changes or whatever it may be. So that's been the real hard work over the last real 5, 6, 7 years of this turning our assets turned out inside out that I talked about. And there are a number of things that we have been trying to bake in. First and foremost, we've got a committee of our board of directors who focuses on these issues. So just like there's a finance committee, there's a governance committee, there's a planning committee, there is now sort of a community health committee, and that's been meeting, and they meet every time the board meets, and there's metrics and reports and all of that. Then we went to every leader and said, how do you set goals for this? How do you build this into your accountability, and get them excited about it, get their people excited about it? Then we said, and then how do we build this into the policy, in the way we do business, like you were saying, Ted, that we are going to purchase diverse, we're going to purchase green, we're going to start purchasing local, and we're going to purchase for greatest impact. And then we're going to think about our supply chain and get our vendors to kind of think in the same mentality and mindset. And then we go to our HR people and think about, we hire X amount of thousands of people every year. How do we think about where we're hiring from, who we're hiring from, what barriers to employment are they facing? And can we shift our policies? Can we think about what we're doing to get them ready and get the pipeline ready to come work here and stay here, and then advance them and be able to, so that they can kind of get mobility in their career and in their lives that way. So it's just sort of turning over every stone inside the organization that way. For grant making, it was the same thing. I think Sarah said it nicely in terms of like sort of good charity, good philanthropy, to really like driving impact, finding the partners that want to drive the mission that we're trying to drive to, and really thinking about that funding in a very different way. So we went through all of those iterations as well. And with the social justice lens now so strong, holding ourselves to a sort of a different standard and approach. Who are we partnering with? Even how do we lay out the RFPs? Do we send the message just to our usual partners, or do we kind of think differently about how we engage? Who are these organizations led by, run by, governed by, and in addition to kind of who they're serving and the populations they serve? So a lot of those kinds of issues we are now trying to learn and implement and think very differently about.
I want to say this is for those of you listening, seems to me like a kind of master class about how you intentionally focus on your organization and align all of its functions. Everything's on the table, consistent with the values and mission of the organization, rather than, well, we care about community, and so we're going to put 4 people in an office over here to do things with the community, but 99% of the organization keeps doing whatever it's doing. So this is really very interesting to me. We've used the word community a couple times, and I always think for both philanthropy as well as a large bureaucracy institution like Kaiser Permanente, the resources and the power and the voice and the agency and so forth that you have is so much greater than the community. There's a kind of reciprocity problem there. Often I know big anchor institutions historically haven't spoken well with community. They're on 2 different levels and so forth. So how do you, and I know you are working this very well, instead of having community be we care about community in a slogan, and kind of after everything's baked internally, you bring community into, and so you're kind of doing something to community. I know that's not what you're doing. How do you engage with community, which is always, I find, inherently a very messy and challenging process, so that there really is reciprocity in this process, and real power. And I know that you've both been doing it. So again, maybe Sarah, why don't you start, and then we'll go to John.
I love that kind of framing, because it just made me be like, gosh, again, are we ever doing enough? Like, what have we done so far? And I think when we centered our grant making strategies around being relational instead of transactional, we had to define what being in a relationship with community means. And so that takes time. And when we set out doing multi-year general operating grants, we're like, oh, we'll build a relationship with folks in 3 years. And it was like, well, what does that even look like? How are you engaging to really find out what the needs of the community are? What's the role of our program officer? Like, we were just kind of questioning everything. But I think when we engage community to help us define the grant program, it's where we really push ourselves out of bounds. Maybe don't do a proposal. Maybe don't do a site visit. Maybe do your own homework, organization, to find out what the needs are and what's the issues in community. And then, join us. Maybe it is engaging in advocacy work. How do I use my voice then as a funder to help influence other funders? Like, we're looking at how does a community need us? We're building a trusting relationship, which takes time, especially if funders in the past have not had a positive relationship with some of these organizations, or there's no trust to begin with. Like, even with our multi-general operating grants in the beginning, organizations didn't trust it, that there was an application. They didn't understand that there wasn't going to be a surprise report at the end. It was like, we have to take the time that it's going to take to build in partnership. And if you're asking for something, hey, we want to help you, then you have to be accountable to that. Like, if you're creating that relationship, it takes time, and we have to acknowledge, like, we're inserting ourselves. At the end of the day, I often reflect and I think, are we most needed as returning these resources, as just writing the check? Am I just getting in the way? Are we putting ourselves in a place where we don't need to be? The data, all of this data we all have access to, shows where the resources are needed. But when you look at relationships and building power and building movement, we do have the effect to inform my board to then make different choices, like that John was describing, and where all of our capital, how do we use all the available capital we have? Like, that's how I see us building a partnership, is not kind of getting in the way and helping organizations define what it means for them to see what success is. It's being accountable to them when you say, we want to be in a partnership with you, letting them define that. Again, I think it just takes an enormous amount of time and dedication and self-awareness. And that's, I think, what we're constantly committed to as an organization. And then asking them to evaluate us based on how we say we want to show up in the world, not necessarily the impact we want to see on our mission. Are we doing what we say we're doing? And what could we do different? And we're engaging in that process right now. And I think that's just another tool to continue to build trust.
There are a number of people from community groups that are on this, at this summit. I'm sure they're pleased to hear you say you invite the community to evaluate you, how you're actually doing. John, any additional points you make about this? I'm sure you've got all the scars one would have from many, many years of this kind of engagement.
Yeah, scars, and they'll be ripped off and open the wounds again. So we will always be trying to perfect this and become good at this, and know that we'll never quite get there. But just like you, Ted, I didn't really know Sarah until this panel got put together, and we had a little a prep session last week. And but I feel like, Sarah, we are just so aligned, and like we work together, because I agree with all of those sentiments that you said, and it's this sort of listening and coming kind of with a lot of openness, and at the same time, I'll admit there will always be so much, especially for a big corporation or organization like ours, this tension of how do you think about broad we all face limited resources or finite resources in terms of people, time, the amount of funding you've got, all of that. So how do you balance being able to do things at scale with broadest impact while still doing that sort of retail groundwork of really getting involved and getting into the community? And we're trying to figure that out, how to calibrate that correctly. And some of the benefits we have of being present and being an anchor is that we do have community relations people. We've got government relations people. We've got sort of communications departments who are sort of in these areas. And so how to best leverage that, listen and hear that. Then we've got specialists who think and design programs and initiatives. But then how do we open that up to kind of, like you're saying, co-design that? I'll give an example of we have wanted to drive sort of economic opportunity. And one way we thought about it, we have several initiatives at play, but one of them right now is to think about whole commercial corridors, several blocks along a street, for instance, like in the Crenshaw corridor in South LA, or in the case of San Diego, the City Heights neighborhood. And we could have gone in there and said, oh, there's like a nice business support fund that's coming together that, organization X is putting together, and we go meet them and hear, oh, great, you're going to do this, you're going to fund. Do a ton of due diligence and really hear about the issues. And at the end of the day, here's a check. And we've done stuff like that. And there will always actually be need for that. Sometimes the immediacy of an issue or urgency, you need to kind of just get money out because people are hurting and supporting right away, as we've seen with COVID. In this situation, we found a partner who specializes in spending months figuring out who the stakeholders are first, finding organizations who are trusted and competent in that community, and then go out and say, what does this community really need? And how do we build something from the ground up that brings together government, philanthropy, community organizations, businesses, and so on, to come together. And we're going to have to kind of go slow to go fast. So we're spending months now, they are spending months now, and we're working with them to form advisory boards, to do assessments, to do environmental scans, to pull together data, look at the racial and ethnic sort of changes, all of that, and then hold town halls, hold listening sessions, and then say, ultimately, there needs to be a food center, there needs to be workforce training, whatever it may be at the end of that plan. And then all of that comes together. And then, we help fund that planning part, but then we are involved with all the listening, the assessment, and the analysis, and then working with the community. And then the next round of our funding then is more targeted. It's like goes to what we heard and what we didn't hear that is being designed, as opposed to just starting up front and saying, this is the kind of thing we want to do. And we're trying to bring that into our operations as well. When we opened up a new medical center in LA, we spent months on ethnographies, thinking about shortages of supply, underserved medical areas. Where could we source terms of construction differently instead of just finding a general contractor? We found one who had reentry programs for people coming out of incarceration and got into apprenticeship so that they can then have a lifelong trade or skill that's different. And then even things like the art in our buildings, it wasn't just sort of some corporate template and we just bought and sort of put up kind of like the nice stuff behind you, Ted, finding like who the local artists are and really funding and driving that. And then that's the kind of thing. So that's the kind of, again, mentality of just like, how do we just kind of open ourselves up? And we're going to have stumbles. We're at times we could have listened more. Sometimes we may show up a little more arrogant than we intend to. But I think those are just lessons. And like you said, the scars that help us kind of move forward.
Yeah, great. That's great. Both Sarah and John, thank you so much for that. I think you've really given us all a lot to think about in terms of, how do we need to approach our own organizations and cultures in order to be more directly aligned with community needs and to address the enormous challenges we face. Before we wrap, and this is kind of 1 minute for each of you, and then I'm going to introduce someone else. But you've been talking about your organizations. John, you did mention government. We haven't talked much about the public sector, but what is your experience or your thought? Here we are, San Diego, most of the people here. The municipal government's very important. What is the role of political will, if you will, and government institutions in helping to support or turbocharge the kinds of things you're talking about? Or is it really a case of government's kind of over there and we as organizations just need to do our thing? Sarah, what's your view?
Well, I mean, I think for us, that's been an exploration. Like, we have been working in silo, and I think the relationships that we've continued to build in following communities to a lot of these grassroots campaigns have led us into spaces where we are realizing like our voice and the advocacy that we can participate in on behalf of these nonprofit organizations. And COVID really showed, like, we had partnered with government here in Seattle and Washington of just exploring where the needs were. And then I hope those are the types of things that continue on, is how can we continue to partner? I think some of the work that I've read that you work on, Ted, really talks about kind of bringing all of these kind of more organized approach to this work, rather than that does include government and business and nonprofits and philanthropy, because a lot of times we're repeating efforts, or we're, and sometimes in philanthropy, there's favorites. And so like, how can we actually work together? There's great data. I don't have the resources. We're really small staff. Political movements are influenced by people's voice. So how can we fund nonprofits who are advocating for what they need, and then kind of back that on to actually see the real policy change? And I think at Satterberg, we're walking into that. It could be a role for us to play, and that's a much larger role. Just even exploring how we invest in political organizing. Is it time for us to look at like what C4s do? And there's plenty of foundations that are doing that. But I think there is a place. And I think for me, it's, and us at the foundation, is just how do we partner and use our voice in the moving up what community is saying. And so I'm aligned with the partnerships, and I think there's a lot more power in it. And then there's an opportunity for us to have some more conversations about accountability.
Thanks, Sarah. So, John, you get the last word. I'm sure KP is involved in lots of government relations, and give us your thoughts in a minute or so, your wisdom.
So the 1 minute version is that government is absolutely core and central to affecting the change that we want to change, and critical to the partnerships that we've engaged in through the years, and they will always be. Whether it be the Sacramento, in the case of California, and the state government, we've partnered with them closely on Home Key, for instance, to do the housing investments, and met with the HCD, the Housing and Community Development Office, to really partner and say, how can we best catalyze what you're trying to do, and vice versa. In San Diego, we're excited about the new mayor coming in, and he's talked about housing and homelessness as a priority. And we're ready to kind of have our folks meet with him in his office and say, here's what we've been doing, here's where we'd love to go. So, and you mentioned political will. Oftentimes, the world doesn't need more innovations or technical solutions, or, it's how do we get people to align around a North Star and align the government agencies and resources to direct towards that, whether it be for data, whether it be for highest leverage, and then the rest of the community follows once there's but building that will is really hard sometimes. Homelessness being a prime example of that. And we've seen in places though, when a mayor, a county executive, whatever, says this is what we're going to do, we're going to partner this way, resources can be marshaled.
Yeah. So it really is to build better, the theme of this conference. It really is a kind of all of community response, private sector, public, anchor institutions, community-based organizations working together and firing on all cylinders. So listen, Sarah, John, thank you so much. I really appreciate your candidness about your own journeys. I think it spoke a lot to people here, I'm quite sure. I want to say also there were a lot of questions coming in from people who are listening in the chat box. I got to a couple. Sorry I couldn't get to them all. I think we could probably do a couple more hours of this conversation. But thank you both for joining in this session and making time available. I know you've both got big jobs, and giving us some real practical examples of how we can approach the kind of change we need to become in our community. So thank you so much. I wanted to introduce now Matt D'Arrigo, the co-founder of the San Diego Creative Youth Development Network and Director of Youth Development for the Claire Rose Foundation and a member of San Diego Grant Makers. Matt will provide background on an upcoming artistic performance and arts organization that will feature today. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. And that conversation that we just had was really important and very, hopefully we'll guide a lot more conversations as we move forward as a field. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt D'Arrigo. I'm the Director of Creative Youth Development for the Claire Rose Foundation. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I'm here to introduce some artists who will be for us today from creative youth development programs that we support at Claire Rose. Before they start, I want to take a minute to discuss creative youth development, why we invest in it, and why it is relevant to the conversation for equitable economies. For Claire Rose, we invest in these programs because they are a perfect intersection for numerous priorities we have at the foundation. Using the arts and creative expression for healing, social emotional development, youth voice and agency, creating college and career pathways, and workforce development through paid apprenticeships and internships. All of these programs are designed through the lens of social and racial justice. They support young people in overcoming obstacles, whether real or perceived, envisioning and realizing futures that are different than they might otherwise could have imagined, and ultimately paving pathways for economic opportunity. We see economic opportunity as social justice. As I mentioned, creative youth development builds the creative workforce, not just for the creative industries here in San Diego, which employ over 100,000 workers and bring in $13 billion a year, but a creative workforce for all industries. Creativity is what drives innovation and growth, and that fits within any sector in our community. And that's why it's a priority in Mayor-elect Todd Gloria's platform. He sees the connection. As part of his platform, he aims to convene education, workforce, creative youth development, and economic development to establish creative economy training pathways for young people, especially those from historically marginalized backgrounds and lower income communities. You can't talk about an equitable economy without having young people and their voice at the table. They represent the pipeline of workers who will be leading and driving the future economy, and they have a lot to say about it. The videos that you'll see today will feature some of these voices. Alumni from David's Harp Foundation and Playwrights Project, an alumni who went on to found his own organization, the Social Workers, and their interpretation of what does equity mean to you. These videos are meant as a short break from the formal programming, but hopefully will engage you in some deeper thought on the role of young people in the conversations around equity and equitable economies. So I hope you enjoy these performances. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sean Malone Khalifa. I am a playwright, teaching fellow with the Playwrights Project, and I'm lucky to be able to share with you a piece of my story when I transitioned from the juvenile system into the adult system. This scene takes place inside of the Riverside County Jail. 18-year-old Sean is standing in the day room after being transferred from the juvenile to the adult system.
Wish my mom was here. Even one of the staff from the juvenile hall that talked me through this. And juvie was a gift with all the support I got. Now I'm in the adult system. I don't know what to do. County jail's run by local street gangs. There have been murders. Even the sheriffs who run the jail stay behind 2 walls of bulletproof glass. survival of the fittest, and I just got my first taste of it. Next move will determine my survival.
Hey, kid. I saw what went down. Phew. That older brother just cocked back his arm and smashed it into the side of your face like a freight train. What was that about?
Guess he didn't like I got an extra tray of macaroni and cheese. I don't know. I didn't ask for it.
Yeah, that food server sure took pity on you. You're just a kid.
I'm not a kid. I'm a man. Get up.
But if you fight me, you will only be hurting yourself. Is that what you want?
I don't have nothing to lose. I'm facing life in prison. I'm gonna die here. Get up and fight me.
No, Sean.
If you don't get up, I'm gonna punch you out of your chair.
So much anger and hostility.
My fists are the only weapon I have.
Do you really want to fight me?
Yeah, you're laughing at me.
Not you, Sean. Just a situation. It's ridiculous, right?
I just transferred in from juvenile hall, so I know everybody's watching me.
So that's what this is about. Trying to prove to everybody else that you're not weak or a punk?
Hell no. None of those things. Guy who hit me might be bigger, stronger, and older than me, but I don't care. Next chance I get, I'm just going to start punching that man so many times nobody would be able to do anything but respect me.
Is that what you want?
This dude just punched me in front of everybody. I'm going in.
And that's going to earn you respect? Be honest with yourself. Sean, is that really who you are?
No, that's not who I am. I'm not supposed to be here. I made a stupid choice, hung out with the wrong people, and one of my friends took someone's life. I got a life sentence just for being there. I'm not a violent person, but I'm trapped with no other choice. Okay, it has to go down.
What do you wish would happen instead, Sean?
Wish I could just sit down in front of that man who assaulted me. Ask him why he did that. Show him some respect. Ask him to respect me.
That's right. I know. Because I am you, Sean. You make the right decision, Sean. You survive your journey. You just gotta trust in yourself. In us. I just like telling you that you'll have to spend 12 more years in here waiting to be set free, but be patient and make the most of your time.
Well, I don't know if I can make 12 more years. You saw how he hit me. How am I going to survive that?
If he didn't hit you today, somebody else would have tomorrow. And then who would have been here to remind you of who you are and stop you from throwing your life away?
You have a funny way of looking at things.
Who you are today is who we're going to be when I am 30. So what do you choose?
Gonna sit down at the table across from that OG tomorrow and tell him I forgive him.
That's the end of the play, and this is the beginning of real life for me. I was released from that journey February of 2020. In my schools growing up, we didn't have arts and theater programs, so the revelation that arts provides solutions to many of life's challenges was astonishing to me. While at our local prison in a playwriting program and other programs at Donovan, people of all backgrounds, races, and gender identities worked together, shared their stories, and celebrated each other's work. This produced an environment where collaborations amongst people with different outlooks could find peaceful solutions to many problems we face every day. The arts programs provided a foundation for a successful transition to our local San Diego community, where I found housing and was also... Hi, my name is Sean Malone Khalifa. I am a playwright, teaching fellow with the Playwrights Project, and I'm lucky to be able to share with you a piece of my story when I transitioned from the juvenile system into the adult system. This scene takes place inside of the Riverside County Jail. 18-year-old Sean is standing in the day room after being transferred from the juvenile to the adult system.
Wish my mom was here. Even one of the staff from the juvenile hall that talked me through this.
So when I was 13, I remember vividly, I was with my friends. We were driving to a drug dealer's house to buy a couple ounces. We were gonna flip and make some money. We ended up picking up the big homie. We drove to the D-boy's house. My big homeboy is the one that walked in, did the deal and stuff, came out. with her drugs in a backpack, right? So he hops in the car and he's all happy, talking about he's gonna make a lot of money. This dude pulled out a kilo of crystal meth out the backpack, and he was like talking about he was gonna make tens of thousands of dollars. And we were shook because we were used to making hundreds, but tens of thousands, that was like, I don't know, like it just shook us. Immediately we wanted to do what he was doing. And I remember he was like, this is what you want to do, say less. And he broke a piece of crystal off his brick and handed it to me. It was a piece like this big, kind of thick. He was like, go make some money and like you're on now. Like just keep doing this and you'll get here. Fast forward, when I was 17 years old, I walked into a studio at the Sarterberg Foundation and I made a song with Brandon. When we finished the song, I told him that I was interested in making music. And he was like, oh, this is what you want to do? Say less, pull up. So he pretty much gave me access to hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Like, I was like this, and he gave me a key, like, yeah, pulled up. He didn't literally give me a key, but he gave me access to everything. Fast forward to now, I'm 22 years old. I'm an instructor at the Sarterberg Foundation. I make music with the little homies in Juvenile Hall, and it's kind of funny because now I'm a big homie. Like, they look at me like that. So I want to share a story of one of my little homies now. His name is Jay Jean. He's in county jail right now. He's locked up over a mistake. We do something pretty cool. I'm just going to show you. This right here is a visitation sheet. They gave you one of these when you go to county jail. So I pull up, we're on the phone through the glass, and we write down kind of how he's been feeling, and then we turn it into lyrics. So this is all his feelings and words, and I'm just writing it with the pen and the pencil or whatever. So I was going to read it for you, but I might as well just record it and show you. So if you want to follow me, I'm going to show you a studio at the Sarterberg Foundation. So check this out. I think they just finished some classes. Yeah, the circle's still there with the chairs and all that. So look, this is what we do like every day, literally. What's up, B?
What's up?
Dope, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Let's do this.
Like all the time.
Yes, sir. All right, take one. Hey, I say the clock keeps ticking, I can't wait to go outside. I'm locked up, they won't let me go outside. Youngest in my unit, but there's no fear in my eyes. I got a new tattoo, says only the strong survive. Navigating politics, around moving I die. And I don't even know why, but it's empty other side. My dogs going to the pen, they leaving me alone. But even when I was with them, I feel I was on my own. I gotta pay for my sins, cause that's part of being grown. If I get a second shot, then I swear I'll right my wrongs. The DA say I'm evil, I need a letter from my coach. There's good inside my heart, I just took the wrong approach. There's good inside my heart, but there's gang in my block and the Glock, so they never outline me and chalk. My uncle praying for me, homies praying for me. God forgive me for my sins, please never ignore me. If I get a second shot, then I'll right my wrongs. If I get a second shot, then I'll right my wrongs. Alright, cut the beat. Let me keep it 100 with everyone here. It's all about opportunities. Somebody gave me an opportunity to do something better than what I was doing. I want to give my little homeboy Jay Jean an opportunity that's better than what he's doing. So now it's up to you. What type of opportunity you want to give?